Warning, the following episode contains descriptions of murder and sexual assault. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey guys, welcome to my podcast. My name's Christina Plord. This is a big dream of mine, let me tell you. I never thought that I would have, frankly, the balls to do this. Talking about true crime and murder and a bunch of stuff and honestly shitty stuff that goes on in the world. I remember always being interested in it growing up, and my brother would be playing with toys and I'd be playing with the computer and looking up a bunch of stuff, because my thing has always been, why do people do the things they do? Like, why would someone do this to someone? Why would they purposely hurt other people? So then quarantine happened, and everything that I thought about the world kind of changed. And I thought to myself, life's so short. Why am I gonna continue telling myself I can't do something? Who said I can't do it? I can do it. I love it. I talk about it all the time with my boyfriend. Talk about my interests and everything. So why can't I talk about it and try and make a podcast and see if there's other people like me out there who'd want to talk to me about it? Because I listen to murder podcasts all the time. My favorite murder, anything. And I was just like, let's do it. And then one of my friends, she's an artist, and she's designing the logo for me. Like, I just have a lot of people around me who support it. So before I begin, let me thank you for coming here, and if there's even anyone listening, and if not, it's just me just doing what I love and talking about it and trying to make an understanding of all the shitty things that happen in the world. So let's get right to it. So today I'm going to be reading and talking about Mary Bell. I'm getting all my information from serialkillershop.com. They're a really cool shop. They have a lot of t-shirts. They write a lot of articles on different serial killers. And they have blogs. They have anything and anything that you would want to learn about when it comes to stuff like this. So the article was written by Chase Whale in March 28th, 2017. It was posted. So Mary Bell, I don't know if maybe you've heard of it. If you haven't heard about it, you're in for a good one. If you have heard about it, you're going to know what I'm talking about. Mary was born to teenage prostitute Betty McCricket in 1957. Betty later married Billy Bell, although their home life was super unstable, a lot of abuse. They lived in an economically depressed area in Scotswood. It's a high crime area of Newcastle. Mary had claimed multiple times that her mother tried to kill her on several occasions, and when she was put on the stand, she testified that she was subsequent to frequent sexual abuse at the hands of her mother. And by the time the killings happened, she was already known at school as an attention seeker, dramatic, always wanted people to focus on her, which is the way that people were describing her. First of her murders occurred on May 25th, 1968, the day before her 11th birthday. 4-year-old Martin Brown's body was found in a vacant house in Scotswood. Although she strangled the boy, her grip wasn't strong enough to leave any really marks on his neck, leading to the medical examiners not really knowing exactly how he died, because eventually she says that she did strangle him, but there wasn't a lot of evidence of that, because usually when someone gets strangled, there's either finger marks, there's bruises, because to strangle someone and kill them, you have to put a lot of pressure, you know? So then 2 days later, Mary and 13-year-old Norma Bell, which they don't have any relation to each other. They were just best friends. They lived really close to each other. They hung out all the time. they broke into and vandalized a nursery where they left notes claiming responsibility for the murder, although the police initially dismissed the confession as a prank. But then, on July 31st, 1968, she killed again. So this was less than a month apart. So she was 10 for the first murder and then 11 for the next one. So now I went to murderpedia.org. Some of the notes that she had left, her and Norma had left at the nursery, were I murder so that I may come back, futch of we murder, watch out Fanny, and F we did murder Martin Brown, fuck off, and a couple other things. But really the police just brushed it off. They didn't think it was serious. They didn't think that this was an actual confession. They thought it was just someone unfortunately taking advantage of a tragedy and thinking it would be funny to write notes like that. Because Martin, during this time, the whole town was terrified. Like, a little boy had just gotten brutally murdered. He was only 3. Like, that's mind-blowing. Like, he's a baby. He's just starting his life. He's just looking into the world, and he sees the good in everyone. And the way, on Murderpedia, the way that Maribel described that they were able to get a hold of him was they just asked him to hang out and follow them. And that's terrible. Like, he trusted you, and you took advantage of that. And it makes you think, why at 11 years old do you already have that much hate and, like, so okay with already killing someone? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's cases like these where it's like, you don't think of an 11-year-old as being dangerous. You think of an 11... I have cousins who are 11, 12, 13. I would never think that they could do something like this. They're kids. They're little kids. They should be playing and having fun with their friends and not knowing about the shitty things that are going on in the world. And it brings apart that question where people are like, well, is it nurture or is it nature? Was she born like this, or did her parents create this quote-unquote monster that ends up taking 2 lives? And do you think that there's anything anyone could have done? It's like, do you think we could have stopped her from doing it? Do you think if someone intervened in her home life, it would have been different? Or do you think no matter where you go, she was bound to do this? She was just born bad. So it's quite sad. Like, you look back and, like, you look at the pictures of her, and I'll post a picture on social media. I'll post a couple pictures for this episode and all the episodes after. You look at the pictures and she's young. Like, you don't see evil. You know, like, some people look at other serial killers, like John Wayne Gacy, and they're like, he looks so creepy. Like, he looks scary. He looks like the Candyman. Like, but she just looks like a young girl. Like, you would have never thought. She kills Brian Howe on July 31st, 1968. So, Brian was found covered with grass and purple weeds. So he had been strangled, and nearby was a pair of broken scissors. Due to the age of him, I'm not going to go into his injuries. If you would like to know specifically what they are, you can look them up. But it's upsetting what happened to him. Like, you can only imagine the pain that he felt and how scared he was. Like, he was only 4. Like, he doesn't even at 4, you don't even know what murder is. You don't know that people do these things to people. So you never think of that. Like I said before, children, they look for the good in people. They look for love and laugh and fun, and they don't see what unfortunately adults see, They're not on the defense like we are, especially people are in a true crime. I know people who are a lot more careless, not even careless. They're not careless. Let me rephrase. They are just, maybe I'm just paranoid. I always look at everyone like, in a way, you always have to be on the defense. Like, you really don't know who people are. And some people are bad, and they don't seem bad at first. They seem like good people, and then they do bad things. Like Ted Bundy. No one ever thought. He was a heartthrob. Everyone loved him. Everyone loved him. But then it comes out he murdered over 20 people. What? Like, what do you mean? It shatters your view of reality and how you look at people. You know? Especially people who know people who do those things. Like, you always hear of TV shows and podcasts of the kids of serial killers, like the BTK killer. His daughter did a documentary. Like, she had no idea. And she says it, like, that was her dad. She loved him. She still loves him. There's still a part of her that's always going to care for him. But then it comes out that he's this monster that she didn't even realize. She never thought about it, you know? So I can only imagine what that feels like. So then it was at this point that the police and the investigators were suspicious of Mary, which at that point was 11, and Norma, who was 13. Mary was evasive and she acted really strange when the investigators would talk to her. Norma was super excited, and with one investigator even saying that she was continually smiling as if it was like some joke, like it was funny. As the investigation started to turn towards Mary, and at this point she had been questioned multiple times. She suddenly remembered, and there's quotes around this on Murderpedia, seeing an 8-year-old boy with Brian on the day he died. The boy hit Brian for no reason, she claimed. She had also seen the same boy playing with broken scissors, but that boy had been at the airport on the afternoon Brian died. So she specifically said a name, is what I'm understanding from this, but it doesn't say the name, I assume for privacy reasons. But then they investigated and they were like, well, it couldn't be him because he wasn't there. He was at the airport. He was 8. So at that point, like, he was probably with his parents. They were going on vacation or coming home from a vacation. Like, he would have no way of doing it. But this was her mistake. By revealing that she knew about the scissors, which was confidential evidence. So when they say confidential evidence, that means they haven't said it in the case. So in some cases, they'll like say certain things like, oh, the suspect was driving this car, but then they won't be like, and in the car was this, because that's something only the killer would know or the suspect would know. And so then if they're interviewing someone and they like drop it without realizing that hasn't been published, then it's like, bing, there was no way of you knowing that, you know? So by her saying that she knew about the scissors being there, she implicated herself. She described them to the T, like silver colored and something wrong with the scissors, like one leg was either broken or bent. And it was becoming clear to the investigators that either Mary, Norma, or both had seen him die, and one of them had killed him. So at that point, they didn't know whether it was Mary who killed him or if it was Norma who killed him, but they were both there. They both saw what happened, and they just weren't being honest. Brian was buried on August 7th. Detective Dobson was there, which was one of the detectives on the case, and he said, and I quote, "Mary Bell was standing in front of the house when the coffin was brought up. I was, of course, watching her, and it was when I saw her there that I knew I did not dare risk another day. She stood there laughing and rubbing her hands. I thought, my God, I've got to bring her in. She'll do another one." So she loved it. Like, she thought it was funny. She was enjoying it and, like, reveling in it and wanting to see his body. And, like, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. So then, before Brian's funeral, Detective Dobson once again questioned Norma Bell, which, if you remember, was Mary's best friend. And also, let's do a quick rewind that I forgot to note. So, Norma's father on May 26th, which was like a couple days, a day after she killed, what was the exact day that she killed Martin? On May 26th, which was the day before this happened, Norma's father caught Mary choking his 11-year-old daughter, which was Norma's younger sister, and slapped her in the face and sent her home. And that's the same day. And then the day after was when the nursery home was vandalized and Martin was killed. So it just gives you a little insight into the kind of person she was. So yeah, so then now we're back to when Dobson's questioning Norma right before Brian's funeral. She claimed that Mary told her she killed Brian and brought Norma to see Brian's body. Mary told Norma, I squeezed his neck and pushed up his lungs. That's how you kill them. Keep your nose dry and don't tell anybody. When she saw Brian, Norma knew he was dead based off how he looked. His lips were purple. And that night, she was taken to, the night that Dobson interviewed Norma again was when she was taken to the police station to give an official statement, because when he was interviewing her, it was just like a conversation, so they need an official statement to be able to use that in court. Her story absolutely shocked the police, and they immediately picked up Mary at 12:15 that night. The detective said she appeared to see herself in a sort of cliche scenario of cops and robbers. Nothing surprised her, and she admitted nothing. And then this is their conversation, part of the conversation. It's on Murderpedia. It says, I have a reason to believe that when you were near the blocks with Norma, said Dobson, a man shouted at some children who were nearby, and you both ran away from where Brian was lying in the grass. This man will probably know you. He would have had to have good eyesight, she responded. Why would he need good eyesight, Dobson said, ready to catch her in a lie. Because he was, Mary said after a moment, clever to see me when I wasn't there. She stood up. I am going home. This is being brainwashed, but Dobson wasn't about to let her go. At one point, Mary asked, is this place bugged? In the end, she refused to budge. I am making no statements. I have made lots of statements. It's always me you come for. Norma's a liar. She always tries to get me into trouble. At 3:30 in the morning, she was allowed to leave. Dobson was then left second guessing himself, but said that after seeing her behavior at Brian's funeral and gathering additional testimony, he brought her back. Dobson said she was very apprehensive. She gave me the impression that she knew the time of reckoning had come. And Mary, it was at that point when he came back for her again that she admitted to being present when he died, but her confession took a turn. So, next on Murderpedia comes her entire confession. And her confession, it's detailed. Very detailed. It's very upsetting. She does blame everything on Norma. She basically says that Norma did it, told her not to say anything, and Mary was just like I basically don't want to be involved in this, and was like trying to keep her head down in the way. And so that is why when they brought Pat, which is Brian's older brother, when they were looking for Brian to the place that his body was found, Mary told him to look over there, but then Norma was like, no, don't do that. And she said it's because Norma killed Brian, so Norma didn't want Pat seeing it, but Mary was trying to get him to walk over there so then he could see his brother. So then Dobson says that he believes that her story had some truth, but it was an attempt to just outright blame Norma. It was not anything that stuck, really. And that's when, at that point, she was charged with the murder of Brian. And she said to him, "That's all right with me," she replied. And then he arrested Norma, who was super angry about the fact that she was getting arrested for this. And she said, I'll pay you back for this." So it was at this point, once she had been arrested for Brian's murder, that then they turned around and looked at Martin Brown's murder. Because at first, they found him behind some empty sheds because he had fallen off a ledge, and he was found by Norma and Mary. But no one thought at first that they could have, they killed him. They just thought he, fell or something, and they just happened to stumble upon him. So at this point, one local boy had said that everyone knew Mary was a show-off, and her screams of "I am a murderer" had simply just been laughed at. So the day after they found Martin, who was murdered on May 11th, 3 girls were playing by the nursery, were then attacked by Mary. And one of the girls said that Mary put her hands around my neck and squeezed hard. The girl, referring to Mary, took her hands off my neck, and she did the same thing to Susan. It was then the police were called, and Norma said that Mary went to the other girl and said, "What happens if you choke someone? Do they die?" And then Mary put both hands around the girl's throat and squeezed. The girl started to go purple, and Norma said she ran off and left Mary. "I'm not friends with her now." And was before Martin's death was when the 3-year-old boy was found behind some empty sheds who had fallen. Mary had ended up admitting to pushing him over the ledge, which is the boy that Norma and Mary found. So on May 12th, when she got into a fight with the girls, that was then reported, and which was on May 15th, and 10 days after that was when Martin Brown was killed. So she wasn't just killing, she was hurting people. She would get angry and she would hurt people, and she thought it was funny. It's weird. An 11-year-old or 10-year-old at the time making these kinds of statements about what happens if you choke someone, and choking a girl so bad on the school playground that she turns purple. There should have been some flags raised, definitely. I think some more involvement should have happened other than just a report happening and the girls just getting yelled at not to do that again. She was choking someone. I feel like we should have gotten her a counselor, something. But from what I'm seeing, they didn't really do much. They just kind of wrote it off. And I hate to say it, but what if she had gotten counseling or something, or someone had stepped in after she did that, maybe Martin Brown would still be alive. Maybe Brian Howe would still be alive, and they would have had a life. So then it goes into Martin and goes back to what I was saying about how Mary showed up at the doorstep of Martin's house after he was found and wanted to see his body. And also it's saying here that they were giving Martin's aunt the creeps by questioning her with questions like, "Do you miss Martin? Do you cry for him? Does June miss him?" And she said they were always smiling, and it just weirded her out. And I just feel like when you're weirded out and you have an intuition or questions like that, I would call someone. I would call the cops, and I would have been like, "Excuse me, these girls keep asking me these weird questions. They should have been looked into more. When a little boy dies, it's not something that you really ask their parents or their family. You give them your condolences and try and help the way they can, not ask how sad they are, if they're crying and asked to see his body. Like, what? I'm just mind blown. And then this was when his mother, June Brown, she said, and I quote, that Mary said, "Oh, I know he's dead. I wanted to see him in his coffin." And said that she slammed the door in her face. 100% I would do that. Round of applause to you, girl. I would have 100% slammed the door in her face. That's so rude. These girls are just interesting. This whole case is just, I don't understand. So then, we're back to when they're in jail already. They're in jail. They're looking into the Martin Brown murder. They're trying to see what hand that she had in this. And they end up getting to the point of charging her with the murder of Martin. And after figuring out also that she had vandalized the nursery with those messages that I had said, and Norma and another boy at the nursery said that Norma was screaming, "I am a murderer," and pointed in the direction of the house where Martin was found. That house over there, that's where I killed. And she didn't finish her sentence. So she kind of admitted to it when her and Norma were fighting, and the boy saw that. So he told them, and that's when, at that point, then she was arrested with that charge. So they end up going to jail. They're in jail. The guards there are saying she's super hostile. She was terrified of going to sleep because she was a chronic bedwetter, and her mom would belittle her and make fun of her and hang up the mattress at the windows to show the neighborhood what she had done, which I think is so cruel for a kid, for their mother to do that, because that's not helping the problem, because there might be a reason why she was bedwetting. You never know. And maybe it would have stopped if you helped her a little bit and tried to get to the root of it and why that was happening. It's crazy. And so they say that if her parents were somehow responsible for her behavior, she wouldn't talk about them. She wouldn't talk about her parents or her younger siblings, really. And so now we get to the trial. So they were brought to trial for the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howe on December 5th, 1968, and the trial only lasted 9 days. The media attention, which was mild compared to what we experience now when you have something, like if this happened now, it would be all over the news for weeks and weeks, like Casey Anthony. Like, it would have been, the media would have eaten it up. But the press was still everywhere. But despite attempts to make them less threatening to the children, both of them were bewildered. Mary appeared to be super attentive, but she admitted eventually that everything was just kind of like a blur, and those 9 days just kind of like flew by in one big like cloud. The prosecutor, Rudolph Lyons, opened the trial by suggesting that whoever murdered Brian also killed Martin. Lyons recounted the suspicious behavior of both the girls at the scene of his death, how they plagued the family with questions, and how they vandalized the nursing next day. For Norma, these notes were most damaging to her because the handwriting analysis that they did showed that Norma was the one who wrote the messages, and not one of the messages, which was, "I murder so that I may come back." So if she was truly innocent, why would she write that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And she kept saying, "Oh, I just watched Mary do it. Like, I was just an innocent bystander." But if you were, why would you write that? That doesn't make sense. Then Lyons asked, how did Mary know that he had been choked? Because it, once again, not public knowledge, but she demonstrated to the House how Martin was strangled. And forensic evidence also implicated her, which was gray fibers from one of her wool dresses was discovered on the bodies of both victims. Fibers from Norma's maroon skirt were found on Brian's shoes. And then, although there were doubts about Norma's guilt, Mary was considered guilty by most. More people wanted to see Mary go to jail than Norma. Mary's family presence at the trial didn't help either. Her mother disrupted the proceedings with her crying, with her long blonde wig slipping off her head like a soap opera. She stormed out of the trial only to reappear moments later. Her father sat quietly ignoring his wife, and that was basically most of the support she had, versus Norma had an entire family. She was the third of 11 children, and reacted to evidence and testimony with more childlike combination of fear and nervous tears. And Mary said that crying was a sign of weakness, so she didn't show any emotion, really. She was just kind of like just sitting there. Like they said, they thought she was paying attention, was super attentive, but according to her, she wasn't. Which I think also talks to the mind state and the brain that she has, because if she cared, or if she changed, like, why would you say that? Like, why would you come out and admit to saying, like, basically I didn't care about what was happening? Like, if you were on trial for murder, just like when it comes, like what they said about Norma, granted, Norma could be lying too. Norma could be putting on a show. You never know. But at least Norma was giving them something. At least she looked upset. She didn't even look like she cared. Norma was the first to take the stand. Her defense lawyer, R.P. Smith, asked her about the day Martin Brown was murdered. How Mary poked her head through the fence because the girls were next door neighbors, and said there's been an accident, and took her to the abandoned house where his body had just been discovered. Mary wanted to tell her that there had been an accident and something about blood all over something, said Norma excitedly. For the prosecution, Norma was an important witness to Mary's violent disposition. One of the things they said, did Mary ever show you how little boys or girls could be killed? Did she ever show you that? When Norma answered yes, Lyons responded, well, that was a very naughty thing to do, wasn't it? To think of killing little boys and girls and talk about it. And Norma agreed. The night before her testimony, Mary had asked a policewoman of what the word immature means. And because the lawyer had said that Norma was more immature and that Mary was more mature than her. So then Mary said, would that mean that if I was the more intelligent, I'd get all the blame? So she took that as, once that night, when after the prosecutor had called Norma immature, and then she found out what the word immature, she didn't even know what the word immature was. She's 11. She's 11 at this point. And she's asking a police officer what the word immature means because they said it during her murder trial. Those words should not be in a sentence together, which I'm just mind blown by it. On the 6th day, remember the trial lasted for 9 days. On the 6th day was when Mary was called to the stand. The room was super excited. This is the girl that they were waiting for. The press didn't really, there's more focus on Mary being the head of the operation versus Norma, so they wanted to hear from her. They wanted to hear from the girl who they thought had put this entire thing together. She was composed. They asked her why did she ask to see Martin in his coffin, and they said, we were daring each other and one of us did not want to be a chicken or something. On drawing in her school notebook, Martin's body with an incriminating knowledge of the crime, she said that it was rumors. People were just saying there was a bottle of tablets and things spilled out of them. It was just to make it look better and that. She had told the house that Norma killed Martin because I had an argument with Norma that day and I couldn't think of nothing else to say. Handwriting experts said the notes that were written in the nursery were both written by both of them, and that one note had been written specifically by Norma. And they said, in fact, every single letter had to be examined separately because Mary and Norma had alternated writing. They called it joining writing. Norma testified that the idea to write the notes came about in Mary's bedroom where they were drawing with a red biro pen, and Norma said Mary wanted some notes written to put in her shoes, and it was because Mary wanted them for the nursery break-in. So while Mary had conceded that the notes were joint, she insisted it was Norma's idea to take them to the nursery. And so then they broke in there and they left them. Mary insisted that Norma wanted to get put away and asked Mary to run away with her. And this was not the first time that they had run off together. When asked why Norma wanted to run away, Mary answered because she could kill the little ones, that's why. Her voice getting shriller, and run away from the police. So she's saying that it's still all Norma and Mary was just hanging out there. It's still her friend, and she's trying to be there for her friend, even with the knowledge of knowing what her friend had done to Martin. Both denied any responsibility, but they did acknowledge that they had been together with Brian on the day he died. According to Mary, Norma strangled Brian. When asked if she was afraid that Norma might kill her, Mary said she would not dare because I would turn around and punch her one. So Mary's not scared of Norma at all, is what she's saying. She's saying that she did this. She's more of a danger to little kids, and that Mary's not worried about Norma, but that she needs to be separated from society, and that's why Mary was going with her and helping her, because she wanted to make sure that this didn't happen to other kids. That's how I'm taking. Norma said that Mary told Brian to lie down and then started to hurt him, and that she left while Brian was still alive, so that when she left and went to her friend's house, she said she went to her friend's house and made pom-poms. If someone actually just murdered someone, why would you go and make pom-poms? Like, if I watch someone kill someone in front of me, I would probably be an absolute mess. Like, that's a lot to handle. And then a 13-year-old to say that, but she left to make pom-poms with her other friend. Sketchy. That's all I'm gonna say. So then, the verdict. So in the end, the jury, they took, after these 9 days, the jury came back and said that Norma was not guilty of manslaughter. Mary Bell was guilty of manslaughter because of diminished responsibility, which means that where a person kills or is a party to the killing of another, he shall not be convicted of murder if he was suffering from such abnormality of mind, whether arising from a condition of arrested or retarded development of mind, or any inherent causes, or induced by disease or injury as substantially impaired his mental responsibility for his acts. So, saying that she has an abnormality in her mind which caused her to kill these boys, and that's why she is found guilty. in both of them. The justice announced a sentence of detention for life while Mary cried, uncomforted by her family. And her detention would be for an undetermined amount of time. Norma was given only 3 years of probation for breaking and entering the nursery. Mary ended up being released at 23. But however, before this time, her mother, Betty, tried to profit from her daughter's notoriety in England, selling her story to the tabloids, encouraging her daughter to write letters and poems that could be sent to the press. And because Betty wanted her daughter to see how much she suffered as the mother of a famous juvenile murder, said Mary. And then her mother said Jesus was only nailed to the cross. I'm being hammered. So see, this is what I don't agree with. This shows you also part of why, like, in a way, how shitty her mother was. Why are you trying to profit off of 2 little boys' deaths that involve your daughter? Like, why aren't you just trying to be there for your daughter? Because I do think when you have a personal relationship, especially with someone who does something this terrible, it's hard to just be like, fuck them. Like, I don't want anything to do with them, you know? But, so I understand when parents, like, you hear of parents or wives or children of these killers who, they still have a relationship with these people. They still go see these people because they also know them on another level, I guess. But then also there's sometimes where it's like, I also understand the other foot, where it's someone does something that terrible, like, then some people want nothing to do with them, no matter what they are, whether they're your kid, your son, your daughter, your husband. Like, I'm not going to stand by you. But I don't think you should try and profit off of them. Like, especially even the parents of Martin and Brian, like, you doing that, it puts it back in the news. They see this. It reminds them of what happened to their little boys. And I think that's extremely insensitive and disrespectful to the families who experienced this tragedy. And now, like, you still have your daughter. She's still alive. At least you can see her. They can't see their little boys anymore. They were 3 and 4. They don't have much to go off of. So, I don't like her. Ridiculous. But in 1977, Mary escaped prison, which is then that Mary lost her virginity, they said. And the reason that she left, the guy that she had slept with sold to the tabloids his story, which he ended up saying that Mary got out so she could get pregnant. And then when she got parole in 1980, or right before parole, in 1980, she was moved to a hospital. She met a married man who got her pregnant. And she said, "It was hard for me not to think of sex as dirty. When she found out she was with child, she had a moral crisis of sorts. But if I think that almost the first thing I did after 12 years in prison for killing 2 babies was to kill the baby in me, Mary felt she had no choice." So she ended up having an abortion. She was released May 14th, 1980. She was 23 years old. And they kept moving her around because people were finding out her identity, and they were trying to protect her identity from people figuring out exactly who she was, because people called her a child killer. People would show up at her house. Like, they didn't want her in their town. They didn't want her around other kids. But it was during this time that she met a young man and became pregnant. And that ended up coming out, and people were flabbergasted because their thing was, why, when you murdered 2 children, should you be able to become a mother yourself? And so people were telling them to take away her baby. but she fought for the right to keep her child, who was born in 1984, who was a girl, a baby girl. As far as she basically says that she fell in love with her baby, like, it kind of made her understand what she had done to Brian and Martin all those years ago, and that her daughter changed her life and made her see exactly what she did and how she wanted to be better. So apparently now she's a super devoting grandmother now. Her daughter's obviously older, and has her own family, and she's a devoted grandmother, she's a devoted mother. And just recently, I just saw she was, let's see, so she became a grandmother at 51, so that was in 2009 was when she became a grandmother. And so the Mary during this time won a court order giving her the right to basically being anonymous for the rest of her life, and her 24-year-old daughter's identity will also be a secret until her dying day. So that was in 2009. And that's it. That is the story of Mary Bell and the murders of Martin and Brian. I don't know. What do you guys think of this case? Do you think she should have gotten let out? Do you think she should have spent the rest of her life in prison? Do you think she should have gotten let out at 23? Do you think they made a mistake? Do you think she should have gotten a more serious charge, like first-degree murder? I think it's a hard case given the age of not only the children who were killed, but the children who were involved in it. Norma was 13, Mary was 11. They were not old by any means, so they could use the explanation that they're young, they don't know what they're doing. But I don't know, I think she should have gotten longer sentence. I don't know if life in prison. I mean, she hasn't hurt anyone since she got out, but I don't know if she really learned or if she just kind of didn't care, because even during the trial, like, she just didn't care. Like, maybe she was just like, oh, I'll just do my 12 years and get out of here. Like, in terms of the span of life, that's such a short amount of time, especially when you're only 11. Like, she got out at 23. I just turned 23 at the beginning of August. Like, you're at the beginning of your life. So, I don't know. It's such a heartbreaking case, and my heart goes out to Martin and Brian, because them and their families, because I can only imagine the pain that they feel on a day-to-day basis. And every time another year goes by of them not being around, you wonder what they could have done in the world. You wonder what their life would have been like if it wasn't cut short so soon by horror and just such sadness. Because now everyone remembers who Mary Bell is. Anyone who's into true crime, you can tell them who Mary Bell. They'll know who she is. They'll know what she did. But the names of the victims, Martin and Brian, there's very few people who know about them. There's very few people who know about their life, their family. And she gained all this notoriety for robbing them of the chance to have a family, to live a life. Like, they could have been the next prime minister of Britain for all we know. Like, it's very sad to think about that this is the world we live in, where these are the things that we have to discuss and talk about, like an 11-year-old murderer. It's mind-blowing. It's crazy. I'll never understand. And that's part of the reason why I'm always trying to learn about this. Because I want to understand what makes a person get to that point where they genuinely think it's okay for them to do that, where there's no like caring for other human life. I don't get it. I really don't, because maybe it's just because I'm such a loving person. Like, I always want to protect the people around me and love them and know how much I care about them. Even strangers, like, if you guys ever need anything, please don't be scared to reach out. Whatever, if I can help you in any way, I will help you. No matter what, I will, whatever I can to make your life better, I will do it. So, how do you get to the point where you can justify taking someone else's life? Especially a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. Like, I'll never understand it. But, on that note, this episode is over. Episode 1 in the books. I'm so excited to have this podcast and to start this journey, and I hope you guys enjoy it, because I'm excited. I'm excited for what's to come. I'm excited to talk to people, to meet new people, to just have a conversation and try and make sense of some of the things that happen in the world. So this is the start of the CMP podcast, Crime, Murder, and the Paranormal. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye!